just really make sure that we're able to get a grasp on what this issue is. And Jaskirat, I want to start with you first. um, jitni jaldi fake news spread hoti hai, it really spreads like fire, right? And before, like, you see something, you receive something on a WhatsApp group, and the next thing you know, it's going viral on Twitter, it's spread everywhere, and it's really become something that's leading to a lot more real world harm. I remember when fake news had first become an issue, people were still assessing whether it can actually have real world implications or not. But now I think we are fairly certain that there are real world implications of misinformation and fake news. So I just want to understand from you, Jaskirat, um, why is fake news just so much more accessible than real news? And what really happens when it starts, when the spread of information starts? If you can maybe help me and the people who are listening to us, help us just track what really happens step by step. How do we understand, fake news from that point of view?
Well, thanks very much for having me on your discussion, Anshul. To answer your question, of course, there's this famous saying that says that a lie travels halfway across the world before the truth even gets a chance to put its boots on or shoes on, and that is very true in our understanding and learnings. Uh, I have an example to give to explain what is it that makes fake news travel so much faster than verified, qualified information. The messages that come to us in WhatsApp, when they come in the text form, हमारे लिए बहुत आसान होता है उसको पढ़ना, उसको फॉरवर्ड करना, उसको बस जल्दी से पढ़ लिया, जैसे कि कोई और मैसेज आया ग्रुप पे, उस तरह से हमने पढ़ लिया और फॉरवर्ड किया. Unfortunately, जो counter fake news है, which is the fact check articles जो हम कर रहे हैं, those are going out in the forms of links and stories. We are still in a very organized media format कि नहीं हम एक proper story करेंगे, उसमें एक credible website पे डालेंगे ताकि लोगों को पता चले एक URL है, वहां जा सकते हैं, पढ़ सकते हैं. And people don't have the patience anymore. People don't have the patience to click, go through the process of loading a web page and then reading that information anymore, which is the same for video. Our own understanding as a media organization, not just a fact check organization, but as a media organization, is that a single story done in the text form and in the video form will see more engagement happening in the video format than in the text format. And that is just an example to explain why it's so much easier for people to be able to share fake news faster than the fact checks that are coming across on their phone. Now, why is fake news coming in at all? What are the motivations? There are various motivations here. There's the biggest one of them, and the one that we've not been able to fight successfully, is confirmation bias. किसी ने already अपना मन बना दिया है, mind makeup कर लिया है कि मैं ऑलरेडी इस चीज में बिलीव करता हूं, मेरा ये पॉलिटिकल, आइडियोलॉजिकल या फैक्चुअल बायस है, और अगर मेरे को कोई भी ऐसा इंफॉर्मेशन दिखे जो उस बायस को कंफर्म करता है, आई एम गोइंग टू शेयर दैट नो मैटर वेदर इट्स ट्रू और फॉल्स. दैट पोस्ट फैक्ट वर्ल्ड which people thought that we were living in after 2016, we had already been living in since even before 2016. It's just become more mainstream now. Things have reached a state where it's as bizarre as somebody talking about the percentage population of a particular community being an opinion and not a fact. Numbers cannot be opinions. Numbers are facts. And we are talking about a time that we are living in where educated, qualified professionals are talking about numbers and percentages as opinions and not facts. And that is a tough battle to fight. This confirmation bias is the biggest reason why fake news is traveling at the pace that it is right now.
Yes, and Jaskirat, I think you mentioned a great point about confirmation bias, and I will come back to that in a bit. But you also mentioned about how there is, it's, I mean, for me it kind of indicates towards a culture. एक तरीके का कल्चर बन गया कि अगर हम लोग किसी चीज में बहुत ज्यादा विश्वास रखते हैं तो उसका जो फैक्ट है वो सुनने में शायद हम उतना इंटरेस्टेड ना हो, चाहे वो कोविड से रिलेटेड हो, चाहे वो कुछ भी हो, और कहीं ना कहीं हमारे इनहेरेंट बायसेस सामने आते हैं जब वो इन्फॉर्मेशन हमारे पास आती है. सो Surbhi, I actually want to come to you on this point, that in the last couple of years we've seen that fake news and misinformation has grown considerably. But at the same time, we are also hearing of a lot of initiatives, like, for example, Jaskirat's initiative and the Quint's initiative called WebCoof. There are so many others out there, right? And Yet at the same time, somewhere there is still a lot of conversation happening around how the traditional media can do more and should do more. Right. So, from your point of view, what is it that newsrooms are doing right now? Do you think, and I'm not talking about newsrooms that say Internews may be working with already, but more, television, mainstream, bigger newsrooms in regional languages, maybe in Hindi language. What is the scene like over there? Like, how do you think they're contributing to this, and what is it that can be done in those newsrooms? What changes can they make to actually stop the spread of misinformation,
Sure,
especially during a pandemic? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Anshul, for having me and doing this discourse. I really think with all the work that I have been doing on this, that really discourses like these are very important. जितना हम इस issue के बारे में ज़्यादा discuss करेंगे, जितना ज़्यादा awareness हम इस सब के बारे में फैलाएंगे, उतनी ज़्यादा chances हैं कि हम और ज़्यादा लोगों को इस एक mission से जोड़ते रहेंगे कि उन सबको अपनी information hygiene का ध्यान रखना. I always like to compare this, this is a pandemic time, hum log sare, respiratory hygiene, hand hygiene, is sab ki baat karte hain. I think what is very key is also for us to understand that hame apni information hygiene ke bare mein dhyan rakhna hai. For all of us, it's very important that we nurture good habits. Information critical hai hum sab ke liye, hum kaise decisions life mein lete hain. Is the sort of information that we receive and consume that decides what sort of decisions we take for ourselves. Which is why it is very important that we get access to trustworthy and reliable information. What has happened over the years is that this information overload, माने आप और मैं और हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए बहुत सारे लोग जो first 3 months of the pandemic, while we were locked inside our own homes, what happened was there was a deluge of misinformation and disinformation from all quarters. We were literally bombarded with all forms of misinformation, right from cures to symptoms. But if I may take you back, a couple years, so this problem of information overload is not really new to us in India. We've seen that in 2016 and 17. You saw about misinformation having real world consequences. हमने देखा था 2016 और 17 में किस तरह एक fake news rumors about child kidnapping different parts of the country में at least 30 लोगों ने अपनी जान गंवाई उसको लेके. We were able to sort of address this at some level. I'm glad that we started talking about this and there were more initiatives which happened, but clearly there is a lot more room to do lots more. Traditionally हम सब लोग used to है कुछ भी अगर हमें एक news story की तरह जो दिखता है उसको देख के हम समझते हैं कि वो news है. Anything that comes with a headline and probably some text along, it seems like it is not news. It is news, but it actually sometimes is not, because ये जो difference है traditional media और social media का, ये समझना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है. The lack of gatekeeping in social media. और हमारे यहाँ पे हम सब लोग जानते हैं कि India actually is the second largest internet population, but we also happen to be the largest user base for social media platforms like WhatsApp, like Facebook, which means majority of the Indians, which are primarily first time internet users, वो लोग अपनी सारी जानकारी पाने के लिए ज्यादा समय social media platforms पे बिता रहे हैं. Which I think became a huge problem, and that's when I think a lot of newsrooms, jumped in. I'm very glad that I've had the opportunity to work with Jaskirat and team at the Quint and a lot many other, media outlets. When I began my journey training journalists on, fact checking and online verification, which predates my Internews time as well, I saw initially बहुत सारे newsrooms में मैंने ऐसे सुना कि there were sometimes editors saying that this is not up to us, ये हमारा काम नहीं है social media में. But I think the sheer scale of problem called for it, and I'm very glad that we got the support of a lot many more newsrooms. At Internews, when we began this journey of training, newsrooms and media outlets across India, there were only about 4 fact-checking outlets in the country, with a collective strength of 10 fact-checkers. I'm very glad that there are about 20 fact-checking institutions now, independent outlets and mainstream media, newsrooms, doing far more fact-checking from back then only in English, Hindi. We have about 14 languages at least in which they are present. But given that we are the biggest media, market anywhere in the world, I still think there is a lot of room, to do more work. And I think अब ये realization और ज़्यादा, apparent है कि अगर किसी को भी कुछ सच के बारे में जानना है, जैसे वो traditionally, newsrooms के पास या media outlet के पास जाते थे, तो अब वहाँ नहीं तो और कहाँ जाएं? But I think the missing piece in the puzzle is still media literacy. जैसे जसकीरत ने बोला, हम अपने confirmation biases के साथ fight नहीं कर सकते हैं. So while, so if I may equate, information to the air you breathe, fact checking, and misinformation, or what we like to call as, fake news is the virus really. Fact checking is the antibiotic, but what we really need to look at is media literacy, which is you train the audience so they have a better sense of the online content they access, and specifically this difference of gatekeeping, ताकि उनको पता हो कि वो एक, the youngsters that you have on this forum, I'm sure all of them are very, particular about their health. They should equally be particular about the media diet that they have. कहाँ से आप अपनी information ले रहे हैं, अपनी life में decisions लेने के लिए, वो बहुत important है. So that's something we should take care of.
Point to Surbhi, actually, I just have a quick follow-up question from you, because you mentioned how when you first started interacting with journalists, they said कि हमारा काम नहीं है, and so on. The whole conversation around misinformation, of course, there is a whole very big role that the media is playing, but India is also probably the biggest market for all social media companies, right? So you have TikTok is now banned in India, but before that, TikTok was just really, really huge, and same with other social media platforms, right? There is no editor there. There is there's nobody there. There's just an algorithm at play, and the algorithm can also be played with. That's the
exactly.
That's the bigger challenge that we are facing over here. So I sometimes wonder, what is it that we can do? How do we sanitize social media of misinformation, especially because in the beginning of the pandemic, what we saw was that there was this whole time when videos were circulating of frontline workers facing a lot of discrimination, being asked to leave their homes, not be letting them enter into their colonies, and so on and so forth. There was a whole sleuth of information that was going around at that time. So and it was all spreading on social media. It was all over WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. What do we do about social media?
So I would say, social media is here to stay. We know a lot of us, do a lot of good work using social media. We are getting to connect with your audience through social media, and it's here to stay. What we need to look at is essentially a large part of our audience, the end users, have been shoved onto a information superhighway, if I may say so. Sheer look at the number of, Facebook posts every second, or YouTube videos every second. We need to make them aware about the difference between the various types of content that they access. I mean, they need to be more aware of the information neighborhoods that they live in. किस तरह की information किस source से उनको लेके access करनी है. You and me also probably have our own chunks of, like I mentioned, we take care of our diet. We do have a fair chunk of healthy food. We might as well occasionally indulge in junk food. But should I be getting all my information from just about social media? I strongly believe information hygiene is a habit that can be nurtured. तो इसलिए आपको पता होना चाहिए कि आप कितना समय अपनी information लेने के लिए किस source से बिता रहे हैं. I'm sure there are a lot of studies which point to the fact that internet, the new internet population in India specifically, जो कि largely अब tier 2, tier 3 cities से आ रही है. बहुत सारी young audience जो आपके यहाँ से join, आपके platform के through अभी भी कर रही है. But they have all essentially been, let alone on this super highway of information without really any training on how to navigate, it successfully, or to know what the GPS, signals, etc. are. So I think we need to institutionalize, this. In fact, the earlier we begin, I would say schools should have information literacy as, one area which they should focus on. So we have a younger, generation which comes on board, which is at least some privy to, all of the new forms of misinformation. At Internews, we've, after having worked with a lot of newsrooms and having a good army now of journalists who care about this topic, we are now taking them to the end audience through our new program, which is Factshala. And I think, that's the need of the hour, that you connect the journalists and the fact checkers who have got a hold of, this entire problem, and connect them to the end audience directly. So they get some strategies, essentially, हमने एक छोटा सा user study किया था, जिसमें हमने ये देखा, what is lacking is that सब लोग internet पे use करते हैं, but they lack the strategies on how to discern facts from fiction. शायद वो, if I may say very simply, शायद वो web search इतनी efficiently, नहीं करते हैं. कुछ भी लिखा हुआ देखते हैं, तो they end up believing it, as if it is news. So that awareness is, it's not really a toolkit, and I'm sure Jaskirat will agree with me, when I say fact checking is more about searching the web really well than just about a toolkit जिसमें बहुत सारे fancy tools हैं.
I remember at last year there was at the Youth Keva Summit, we had a speaker, an IS officer from Kochi, who got schools to actually start classes on understanding fake news, and the impact was quite phenomenal there. So I think that's definitely a really good suggestion there. Dr. Sparsh, I want to come to you on this, because like I gave the example, right? You were at the forefront, you are still at the forefront of fighting COVID-19, and you first hand saw, आपने खुद देखा सब कुछ कि उस समय किस तरह के वीडियो सर्कुलेट हो रहे थे. आई एम श्योर काफी एंजाइटी बिल्ड हुई होगी, आई एम श्योर काफी ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस आए होंगे मन में कि क्या चल रहा है ये और ये कैसे चल रहा है. मेरा सवाल आपसे ये है स्पर्श की, how difficult does misinformation make your job? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I just want to hear from you. How difficult does it make your job? And what is it that can be done for frontline workers and for people who are, bearing the brunt of this misinformation to really counter that?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you my own personal experience and related to maybe how every other frontline worker is maybe working on this. Technically, every doctor is kind of used to fake news. I feel, there's been fake news about HIV in the past, about every other disease in the past which has come. Like in my second year, there was this one person who came to me with a cotton chain saying that this is taking away my jaundice. So, and he did not want to take medication because of that reason. So I think we are all being very used to fake news. And again, the difference in this pandemic for anyone, every doctor or every colleague of mine has been that we are now wearing PPEs. That's the only difference, because healthcare industry functions like this and has been functioning like this forever. And since the beginning of the lockdown, there were, I think, fake news creeps in places where there is not a lot of strong facts or strength in that subject, right? Like, because no one is really aware of what is happening with COVID. And over the course of last 8 months, even as a doctor, my colleagues and everyone have learned different things and different ways to treat it every single day. We didn't have certain drugs which we're treating right now with in the beginning of the year. We're trying, and vaccinations are still coming. We have no idea when it's coming. So, because there is not a lot of clarity in my profession or us as a whole, as a team, I think it was very easy for fake news to creep in. But the disadvantage was, I remember I was working with migrant workers. I was helping them get certificates so that they could travel back home. That's where the fake news was really, which was, I think, a systemic error. Like different migrant workers had different source of information as to where they could get their certificates. Was it supposed to be made in the train while they're traveling, or was it supposed to be made by a doctor, which was then again taken advantage of by a lot of crooks? So that is where I think fake news really started creeping in. Other than that, I think every doctor is kind of used to this fake news. It was saddening to see how my friends started getting kicked out of their flats in rental spaces.
Yeah.
But it was kind of expected. I really feel it was all of us expected this was going to be the reaction.
Yeah. I think, I very clearly remember this one story that came out of a doctor who died of COVID. And when they were taking his body to the burial ground, that journey was very difficult because it met with protests. People were not letting them enter, the area that they had to go to. It was just a mess. And that story, I remember, seeing it on Twitter. And then we also covered it, firsthand. And it was in Chennai. And I think that was just one of the many things that probably came out. There's probably a lot more that we did not even hear of. Of what the frontline workers face. Thank you so much, Sparsh, for sharing that. Kamna, I think I just want to come back to what Jaskirat said, right? Confirmation bias. I think somewhere, I really want to understand, why is it so easy to believe fake news, and what is the psychological impact of fake news on me? Like, why, when I see something and I start believing it, what does it do to me really?
I think, it was so good that Jaskirat put this out right in the beginning, that we are looking at a confirmation bias. And where does it stem from? It's coming from the fact that each and every individual has a certain belief system. That belief system is being built over a period of years as you're going through numerous experiences, as you're getting socialized, whether it's at school, whether it's through your family members, whether it's through the media that you consume. And whatever is that information and belief system that you have been formulating, typically we get also drawn to further information and evidences which are going to lead to a confirmation of that viewpoint. right? And which is where the confirmation bias starts creeping in. Now, what also that does is, if you're looking at it from the perspective of social media, and I may be slightly jumping topics here, when you're looking at it from the perspective of social media, when you start searching for information, because you have that pre-existing belief system, you're looking for stories, you're looking for information which is relating to that. Social media has algorithms, media has algorithms, which kind of keeps on putting forward only that kind of information. So somewhere you get limited in the kind of variance in what could be the different perspectives. So, and what you also end up doing as individuals is, we tend to surround ourselves by people who tend to add more to what I already believe in. We don't like to get into spaces where we may have varying opinions, right? So typically, if you're looking at any kind of a conversation, which could be even slightly polarizing, we would find it very difficult to continue being in that social space, right? So we also tend to align ourselves with individuals who would hold similarish viewpoints. And so oftentimes, again, in this context too, we end up limiting the kind of information we may be receiving from the outside world. So we are not exposing ourselves adequately towards different vantage points. And then Kahneman is a psychologist. He's done enormous work even in this space, and he talked about how we are all very cognitively lazy. So essentially, when you're looking at information that you're consuming, you don't want to make that kind of an effort to try and assess that, okay, would this be accurate information? Is what I'm reading adequate information? Where is this coming from? We don't ask those questions because we believe cognitively that there is another task out there which I need to expend more energy and effort on. So we don't even put weightage to the fact that I may need to assess whether the information I'm consuming is is credible or not. Is the source credible or not? We're not even going into that kind of a thought process, and so we don't pay adequate attention. And simple things, there are various disclaimers which are put across, in different on different web pages, on different stories. A lot of times people will not look at those disclaimers. They're also printed in such minute fine print that you can barely make out what's even there. So we're also kind of creating content in a way sometimes that it's going to lead to misunderstandings on the part of people, and it just keeps on getting perpetuated. And I think finally there's also social pressure, right? If you're a part of a certain group, you don't want to be the one who stands out like a sore thumb. You want to be aligning and conforming to whatever is the larger picture that is being advocated within that particular group. And so you feel very hesitant in putting forth perspectives which could be divergent, which could still be accurate. We don't question. And I think somewhere again that links to something which Surabhi was talking about, that it needs to start, the questioning piece needs to start at a very early age. It needs to start within the schools. It's something that we need to start inculcating within our students, that and it starts with when you're talking about how do we give our exams, right? We look at a lot of rote learning. We don't look at a text. We don't try to understand, analyze, question, think beyond it. So when you're not teaching those skills, even within the context of education in general, how are individuals going to inculcate them as adults? Not everyone is going to have people around them who will be able to explain this to them or make them recognize this. And so people get limited in their abilities, and the impact is immense, right? The impact is not just on the individual self. You're looking at the whole collective, which is getting affected by this entire, virus of misinformation. So we coined that. This virus of misinformation has been kind of just percolating into our systems, and it's taking away our ability to be able to trust, either as individuals, even as a collective whole. It creates a lot of insecurity. It leads to a lot of question marks in people's mind. We're always looking at things, and we're almost in this space of where we're quizzically looking at information. We don't know, should we trust it, should we not trust it, what is true, what is not true. It doesn't help. And what it can certainly lead to a lot of times is a lot of conflicts, whether you're looking at individuals, whether you're looking at society as a whole. And so there are so many larger problems which can come into play. And if you're looking at the COVID pandemic, one of the things that Dr. Sparsh, Anshul, you yourself were talking about, was so many doctors experienced isolation. you were in that space where you're trying to do your best work, and yet you're getting limited by the social network that surrounds you, the community that surrounds you, and the effect of it on your mental health, on your sense of self, your identity as an individual is enormous. And I could go on and on, on the kind of impact that it would have on individuals. It's
Yeah.
truly immense.
Right. No, thank you so much for that, Kamna. Honestly, I got a bit worried when you said that we have to look at it from such a systemic point of view that it looks like we really should have started yesterday. To include this in our educational system and wherever possible. But obviously, I mean, it's never too late, and I think there's obviously a great if nothing, an opportunity for us to be working on this. And I just want to tell everybody who's listening that if you have questions, please do post them in the comment section. If you have ideas, if you have suggestions of what you think can be done to counter misinformation, do post that as well. We'll actually just bring it into our conversation and discuss that too. And maybe we can get started on it together. So please do keep commenting and do keep sharing your thoughts as well. With that, Zafin, I really want to talk to you a little bit and understand, because I mean, we heard from everyone, we got a sense of how big this problem is. And of course it's huge. It's leading to so much stigma, so much stereotype. It's leading to communities getting neglected, and so much more than just what we see at the surface. When an organization like UNICEF that works with the government, when you come up with a solution and when you're implementing it, which is what you're doing right now on this issue as well, what are some of the biggest challenges that end up coming your way, and how are you at your level trying to counter that at this point?
Thank you, Anshul. We noticed early on in the pandemic that the pandemic itself is very, very difficult on people. Its primary impact itself, the infection, the spread of the disease, the fear. And then when you think about the secondary impact, the joblessness, the economic impact, the migration, and the of problems that this was causing and leaving a very long-term, disadvantage to people, uncertainties, distress. So, and then this situation has been further worsened by misinformation, baseless news, views. So, and that really daunts the spirit and damages the trust, disrupts the social cohesion and harmony. So that is what we have noticed. And in a time of crisis, as the UN Secretary General has said, science and solidarity are the most important things. So we have decided earlier on, and in fact, the preparations for a anti-stigma and discrimination campaign started in April, and it was already rolled out by May. So it was part of the, we have a number of response pillars in the UN and also in UNICEF. So it's part of the risk communication and community engagement intervention pillar. We rolled out the advocacy interventions to, with the government. So as part of the project, UNICEF supports the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and to implement the national communication strategy to counter stigma and discrimination. And then this is coordinated with 13 other agencies, including UN agencies like WHO, UNDP, UNFPA. So, and the strategy itself has 4 pillars: advocacy, capacity building, community engagement, and media engagement. So it has multiple strategies, and it really tries to reach out to protect specific groups. And who are these specific groups? We have primarily, as the speakers have already said, and we know that it's primarily the infected, those who were infected and their family members, people on the move, because they are always suspected of spreading the disease, for rightly or wrongly, migrant workers, emergency responders, frontline workers. So firstly, we wanted to address it from 2 ends. On one hand, to reduce stigma and counter misinformation. The misinformation was, of course, really making aggravating the stigma and discrimination, and on the really increase harmony, kindness, social cohesion, and so it was going from both ends. One of the key objective is to counter, tackle misinformation. Campaigns like Take Care Before You Share, really encouraging young people and others to verify information before they pass it on. And then also addressing the inadequate knowledge. The infodemic there's a deluge of information, but we all know that there are very little correct information for people to know about the symptoms, what should be done, how should they protect themselves. So at the beginning, those were some of the issues which still persist. And then there was low risk perception. In spite of all the dangers and what was happening, there were conspiracy theories. This is not really serious. You don't have to wear mask. Then pro-mask, anti-mask, it became a political issue globally and as well as India. So those were the really issues that we were trying to address through a multimedia, a 360-degree campaign, which had social media, which had, we worked with influencers from all, sections of the society, including major UNICEF Goodwill ambassadors, celebrities, Amitabh Bachchan, Sachin Tendulkar, and all the big names. On the other hand, the local opinion leaders, religious leaders, other influencers, really engaging proactively with all media, all language not only the mainstream media or big media, also the language media and the most marginalized RJs, bloggers. So it was all out, and we had a lot of audio-visual materials, really thinking through and creatively trying to message. We had from UP a coronavirus supervillain series, animation series, which really went viral globally, not only in India. And it was in a humorous way trying to reinforce the message.
Right.
So all these things we are doing, and it went through not only nationally, but different states had different creative and innovative initiatives through this campaign.
Great. No, it's actually wonderful to know, Zafreen, that there's so much happening, to counter this misinformation flow, especially during the pandemic. Jaskira, there's an audience question that I want to ask you, and then maybe it'll be great if Kamna, maybe you could also add to it after Jaskira. So Akshita Rawat, who's watching this live, asks, fact checking. How can we initiate a behavior change in people? And this is where it gets interesting, especially in our family where elders are hooked to WhatsApp and they like sharing whatever they see. I think this is a big issue, right? Family elders just spending just a considerable amount of time on YouTube. We've seen data that says that every 1 in 4 videos on YouTube is most likely fake. Especially around COVID. So at a time like this, beyond fact checking, because like you said, not everybody's going to click the link. What do we do? Like, how can we initiate that behavioral change?
I mean, when we counter in a creative and innovative way, wrong information with right information in a very, very simple, way, not complicating it, I think people do respond. Most people do respond and see the difference. So that can be one way of doing it. And then young people, using the young people and their voices and their enthusiasm to influence the elders. That can be another way of doing it. So we have tried some of these also.
Right. Thank you so much, Zafreen. Jaskira, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Thanks, Anshul. So the term that we were all probably looking for over here is, we are talking about the information highway, an expressway, and an avalanche. You're looking for the term infodemic because we have a pandemic of information. There's so much information that the human brain is not capable of properly, critically processing that information right now. And that is what we are dealing with this avalanche of unlimited YouTube and WhatsApp messages, YouTube videos and WhatsApp messages, and of course, comparable other social media platforms. No human brain is capable of processing and making sense of all that avalanche of information, and it's becoming very doom scroll kind of a mode where we just in a very limited part of our mind is actually focused on analyzing the information that we're reading before we are actually forwarding or amplifying that information. Now, how do we change the mindset of our elders? I wish we had just the way we have a child lock mechanism for children. I wish there was a locking mechanism for, frankly, it's the people of all age groups. In my experience, I think it's very easy to typecast कि बड़े ऐसे करते हैं, छोटे ऐसे करते हैं. My experience is someone in my age, someone who's elder, one generation older to me, someone who's one generation younger to me, they're all open to falling for misinformation. I would say that the younger ones are slightly more adept at processing information and are the ones who are preteens and teenagers right now in school. They're slightly, I would say, more understanding of how to process that information. One method that has helped us is to show the damage that it has caused. If it has resulted in the death, of somebody, if it has resulted in a community getting ripped apart, a village or a town facing huge disturbance, and that has resulted in damage across community lines, across families, it doesn't matter. When that storm hits you, the storm doesn't see who you are, what your identity is, what your age is, or what your gender is, because it will hit you nevertheless. So when you amplify the damage that it has caused, to show that this person, there was a fake news about this person, and because of that, he was not able to get a train ticket, or even when he was traveling in train, somebody saw his face and recognized his face from a fake message and started threatening that person completely based on a fake message. That's one. There's another incident of a police inspector who was having in Bangalore, who was having a seizure. And because of his seizure, people thought that he was actually, the way he was waving, he was actually under alcohol consumption, that he was a little drunk. And then he passed away a couple of days later. But for days and weeks, his widow had to fight the stigma that he actually died because he had too much alcohol and not because of seizure. We went and interviewed her to show the impact it had on her and her family and her young child, to be forced to sustain this kind of lie while they should have been mourning his death. And those are the kind of messages, unfortunately, that we constantly need to seek out and show to our friends and family members, to tell them that, listen, be very careful before you hit that forward button, because that forward button could very well result in either the death or, even worse, destroying a living person's life, or the family, or a community for that matter. That's one of the many things that we need to start exploring. But when it comes to family, because this is specifically about the family WhatsApp groups, I think जितना हम वो false or fake message forward करें, उतना ही उसका impact अगर वापस ला पाए और वो दिखा पाए, I think there will be somewhat some percentage of helpful way of addressing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I remember seeing this video on Instagram recently about a guy who was thrown out of his family WhatsApp group for countering fake news and misinformation. And he talks about how it's important to seed these spaces. So he got another family member to add him back so he could continue countering it, in the WhatsApp group. Kamna, do you want to add to this? What more than, fact checking and busting fake news by formal organizations? What more can we do in spaces like our WhatsApp groups?
I think I agree to what Jaskirat said, that it really helps to put forth, what has been the impact of that particular information. But I think the question the lady is asking us is also about what can she specifically do with the adults around her. And I think the one thing we always emphasize is conversations. A lot of times what we forget is we don't necessarily talk and communicate in the most patient manner with the people around us who are not necessarily of our age group. And I think that's the one thing that I would really like to reinforce here. It's something that, I also as an adult, as an individual may experience, that if I have to explain something to my parent that I believe in very, very strongly, I'm likely to use words which could be a bit harsh at times. I may lose my patience a lot of times, especially if I'm a younger person. And I think that's something that you really need to be mindful about, because you also need to try and understand that the adult in your family, the family members are also coming with their own belief systems and experiences. There is something which is causing them to keep on holding on to that viewpoint so strongly, or which is pushing them to feel that, okay, they need to keep on sharing that message with other people around them. If you can work a little patiently and try to engage in a dialogue, you'll be able to understand where is that need coming from. Why do they feel compelled to share that information? Is it because they want to create a certain persona, or they want to conform to a certain way in which their groups are operating? Do they really feel that that information is in fact true? Have they been hearing information that you're not aware about, right? Or is it that they're not adequately consuming that information, they're not listening to the whole of it, and they just forward it automatically thinking that that's the norm? So there could be so many elements associated with it, and if you can just take a little patient approach, be a little calmer, talk to the person who you're whose viewpoint you're trying to change, and try to understand that, and then help them understand where you're coming from, these dialogues can really change the landscape of the narratives that happen around us. And I think this is, if we can start inculcating that as individuals, I think that we can have a very large scale impact. And the other thing I think is that whatever you're trying to share, and research shows this very consistently, that if you're trying to bust any kind of myth or misconception or misunderstanding or misinformation, you need to be very specific. Don't talk in general terms with people, right? Because they're not able to necessarily associate it with that particular instance that you're referring to. So you need to make your communication very specific about why it wasn't okay for them to share what they did share. And if you make it precise, they're more likely to understand and reflect on it and introspect on it.
Right. No, thank you so much for that. I think, Surbhi, did you want to add a point? I think, yeah.
Yep. So, thanks, Anshul. I thought I would just add to this, and this act of being kicked out of the family groups. In fact, in some of our trainings with media outlets and now for fact checking, and media literacy efforts, we asked a lot of fact checkers, what is the one common problem? And this is like something they all face broadly. So we checked with them, what is it that has worked with, a lot, just Kirat, would totally, second that. I'm sure he would have tried doing this. What is it that you do with elders in the family? Just like Kamna said, I think we need to realize for most of them, especially the elders in the family, this is their first interface with the internet. They're all jumping onto the internet bandwagon rightly on their mobile phones without having gone through, all of the other formal, education about, what the internet world is. So while internet can be the best fact checker, it probably ends up being the best bias confirmer, for them, often at the same time. So yes, when you give them back, like Kamna said, a specific link, probably a lot many times handing them over links, fact check stories, so they will get into the habit of checking before sending it, they're on. So you will do it once politely, you will, second time ask them, hey, I checked it on, so and so platform, look, this is what I found. And sometimes all it takes is really 10 seconds to check on the web. So over a period of time, they start realizing that they need to check this on so and so platform or on the web before doing this. So this is something that has worked. And like Jaskirat said, totally, a lot many times when elders in the family do this, that's with an intention to help, but reiterating, and sharing information a lot many times when, that intention to help can backfire and actually cause harm, helps, too. So
thank you so much, Surbhi. Sparsh, I actually have a question for you. You are a YouTuber and you use your YouTube channel to also counter fake news. Am I right? I think, yeah, you active. Yeah. So I just want to understand, Sparsh, how, because there are many young people listening to us who would love to do something like that. I'm very sure, who would love to use, who would love to create their own videos countering fake news and so on. What is it like, firstly, to do this as an individual? You're not a part of any media organization. You're doing this because you've faced it yourself, and you want to counter it. And secondly, how difficult is it for somebody to simply start, something like that and begin countering misinformation?
So, okay, I'm a very practical guy. I started YouTube not with this purpose, but then it became my most watched video. So what actually happened was I started the whole journey of trying to showcase what's happening on the other side of the hospital from the doctor's perspective. And I wanted to spread a lot of positivity about people working at the front lines without the toxicity and the grimness which was available on the net about COVID. So since March, when I started working, I worked in every department, basically as a screening doctor, as a ward doctor with COVID patients in the ICU, and as well as screening in containment zones. But so I was just basically making videos, and I wanted to just spread a lot of positivity. And then I realized I was very alone till the time I met certain media people who actually got in touch with you. So you're never really alone. I don't you people out there are kind of looking on or holding on to things which are positive on the net because there's so much toxicity all around. And making something to bust fake news isn't really difficult for a person who's working in that, who's an expertise in that department. So when it came with anything dealing with a patient or with I don't know if you all have just seen recently, there was this dead patient on a ventilator in KEM controversy, and the patient's relative started beating up doctors, which became a very common norm, and for everyone to see how there was violence against doctors. So I just wanted to make a video on that. And Plug TV, there was a media agency who actually got in touch with me and helped me promote it also. And it became very easy. But the difficulty I feel is, no matter what you say, there is always going to be a crooked person out there trying to pull you down, trying to say कि नहीं यार डॉक्टर पैसे कमाने के लिए बना रहे हैं, ये तो सिर्फ इसलिए बोल रहा है क्योंकि इसके कम्युनिटी के वजह से हुआ. And I think I understand him, because जब तक आपके ऊपर नहीं होता तब तक शायद you don't act on it also, as a general say. So I mean, those are just some of the difficulties that I faced, but it's fun. I felt a lot of satisfaction making that video or busting that news. One, I had a lot of confidence because I was an expert in that field. Well, there was a lot of self-boasting happening right there. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, if you know about, if you can back yourself with information, I don't think you should be afraid in stepping up to your mom and dad also in telling them that this is wrong.
Absolutely. And I think many young people are now trying to counter fake news and misinformation in their own way on social media. I have a whole flood of audience questions that have suddenly come in, and I'm cognizant of the time, but I just, before we go to the rest of the audience questions, very quickly, just, very briefly, Zafreen, if I could just bring you in again. Like you already mentioned, there's a lot that you're already doing with the government of India, especially around this new wave of hate speech and discrimination, from scapegoating, stereotyping, stigmatizing, use of xenophobic language. What are some of the insights that you have gained from the campaign that people who want to now counter fake news can actually use?
I mean, you have mentioned language, which is a very important, element of what we do and how we. So we try to make people aware of the right using the right language. For example, victim, not using victim, not using those kind of language that there are some religious terms that not to use that, and it's not very easy to convey because there are conditioning and habits, but I think gradually we are getting those points across. So it is working, and we have to just keep on to it and show the real impact it's having, as colleagues have said here. The discrimination and this.
I think there is a slight internet problem. Zafreen, we'll hopefully come back to. Yes, I think there's a little bit of a patchy internet. I just want to quickly jump to an audience question that we have at this point. So this question is by Meghna Pandey, and Meghna is asking, it's more of a comment and a question. I believe that rather than focusing on believing the misinformation, we should be focusing on the source of the information. Social media is not just spreading fake news. It is trolling people. It is taking lives of people, affecting teens, conning people, and whatnot. What steps can be taken to control uncontrolled usage of social media? Actually, I want to pose this question to you, Kamna, because I think there's obviously a school of thought that believes that social media should be controlled as much as we can. But what I wonder is whether controlling social media per se is actually going to help stop the spread of fake news, because of course we are seeing the worst of it right now. But even before the internet was what it is today, fake news was going around. I mean, people were spreading rumors, and it was leading to violence. There was a lot happening. Maybe it was a lot less. Maybe we don't know the extent of it. But do you think controlling any access, for that matter, can really help us counter misinformation?
I think the question here is, can we actually even think of that kind of a situation where you can even exert that kind of control, right? We do not live in a country where that is something which is going to be a viable option in any case. So I think we need to steer away from that entire, thought process where we're saying that, okay, we could perhaps control it. At the end of the day, it's going to be far more important to understand and accept that social media is a reality, and it's going to continue to be a reality of all our lives, regardless of what age an individual is at, regardless of their gender, what area of this country they come from, what region, what religion, what caste, what socioeconomic status. Everyone has access to media and social media, and that's our reality. I think what is far more critical at this point in time is, like Surbhi was mentioning earlier, that are we going to start working towards making individuals more aware of how are they consuming media? What is it that we can do in order to start helping individuals question the kind of media that is coming across to them? And we usually talk about 5 questions that people absolutely must ask themselves, when they have certain information which is coming their way. So you start with, who is it that has created this particular, information that is coming at me? What is the source of this particular information? What are the techniques that are being utilized to attract my attention? That is it being sensationalized? Is there some particular role model which is being put out there because I would identify with that person more? And so is that what is happening here? How is it that people could perhaps view this particular piece of information differently from the way that I am looking at it? What are the particular lifestyles or values that are being looked at through this particular content? And why was this message even sent? We need to start creating an individual sense of responsibility. That's how you can bring about a collective change, because unless we're going to push for that, unless we are going to start talking about how individuals need to be responsible for their own actions as well as for their own inaction. So if you are seeing someone who is trolling another person on a social media platform, you need to start asking yourself, what am I doing? Why am I waiting for someone else to take that action? How is it that we can create a movement which is there within our community where people feel encouraged, they feel empowered, and they do not feel a sense of threat when they would try to tackle some of these issues? And those are the larger questions I think we need to start moving towards, because this is not going away.
Yeah.
This is something which is a reality of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Jaskira, I just want to bring you in on this again, as well. I mean, of course, there is, like I said, already so much conversation happening around control WhatsApp and, decrypt it and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just too much conversation on that front already. Do you think that there is any onus that we as citizens should be asking social media companies to take? Do you think we should be holding them accountable just how we hold, media organizations or even non-media information organizations that are spreading this fake news? Should we be asking questions to a Facebook or Twitter or, and so on and so forth?
Just to create a setup for the answer that I'm about to give, it's not all gloom and doom out there. And to provide a basis for that is when we opened up our channel for inputs from our readers to send in tip-offs on fake news, we put out an email address and social media handles that they could send tip-offs on. We received over 250 to 300 emails in just a span of 24 to 48 hours. And once the social media channels opened up, it was a complete avalanche. Just how we feel overwhelmed with the fake news, we were overwhelmed with the tip-offs from active participants and citizens and readers who were wanting to do something about it, did not feel empowered, but at least felt that they were doing their part in tipping us off about it so that our teams could look into that. So that at least gives us some hope that it's not all gloom and doom, and there are actually people wanting to help. It's just that sometimes either they don't have the time because of their life and profession, or that they may not have the tools or the knowledge. As Surbhi pointed out, the media literacy over here is very important to plug that gap. But in the interim period, people like our other fact checkers in India, like Boom and Alt News and all the other fact checkers, are going to try and do the job for them. Yes, people do need to create some sort of a pressure and accountability to this on the social media platforms. It is as a result of that pressure and accountability that platforms like Facebook and Twitter have started doing something on fake news and disinformation and misinformation. Platforms like YouTube and Google have also started acting on that. right now Google has as an option when if you search for certain information, it prominently ranks the fact check story of that information along with a special tag under it that says this is a claim and this is found to be false. And this kind of now there's a long way to go, but this is a start of sorts. Similarly, Facebook has a global program where it has onboarded close to 50 to 80 fact checkers to help tag misinformation on their platform. All of this is a result of public pressure and demands for accountability. A huge part of it came from the impact of the US elections in 2016, and now we are in 2020 with the US elections around the corner again. But I would say that the public pressure that built up after those elections did result in a huge amount of accountability. But we know that this is just a start. To take it to its logical conclusion, we need to keep the pressure up, not just from the media organizations, but from the people who are using these platforms. If it were not for this whole ban Facebook or ban social media campaign, which was further aggravated by the Social Dilemma, the documentary on Netflix, had it not been for that, a lot of the action that we are seeing would also not have happened, is what my belief is.
Right. No, absolutely. So I think there is a huge role that creating the right information and rallying people around it can actually create. We're completely out of time. Yes, Surbi. I was just going to go to last comments, but I would love for the panel to give in their last comments. So Surbi, maybe we could start with you on what you wanted to share, and also just maybe telling our viewers what is it that they can do in their individual capacity to start countering misinformation as much as possible, and build a community around them that can really rally.
Sure, thanks, Anshul. Just to add to what Jaskirat was saying, I think it's totally a very complex problem, something that none of us can individually, sort of tackle. So the need, like Jafreen said at the beginning, is to show solidarity and collaborate with each other to come together. Jaskirat gave an example of how fact checkers, coming together with tech companies, have been able to make at least a good start. If I look back at 2 years when we started, our program, when there were really not many, fact checkers in the country doing fact checking, to where we've traveled now, it's a considerable dent in the ecosystem, I would say. Now you have at least an army of fact checkers there who can give you an answer to whether a piece of information is right or not, which wasn't the case until about 2 years ago. And I think, working together with the tech platforms, they've been able to amplify the reach of that trustworthy information, which sort of lessens the gap. The big problem with misinformation or fake news is that increases the gap between end users and trustworthy information. So working together, with different stakeholders, in the time of COVID, we've also seen fact checkers working with the government in some states, with the police departments in some states to, sort of tackle this problem of reach. There has to be more reach for the right information. So I think collaboration is key there. We need to join hands, work with different stakeholders to tackle, this problem. That's my parting note.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming that, fact checking can potentially emerge as a fairly solid job opportunity in the very near future, instead of, organizations reassigning journalists internally. It's something that can emerge as an aspiration for the people who are watching this live as well.
Absolutely. I think we've seen now, as a result of our previous program, we have about, active 50 to 70 fact checkers, full-time fact checkers now. When we started off the program, there were only about 10. I'm so glad there are, this mascots on the ground who are so passionate about something like this, but they totally need more support of influencers, people like Sparsh who are doing this purely out of passion. Like I said, I think we have a huge country and a diverse, country to tackle different languages. It takes all of us to come together.
Absolutely. So I hope that the audience that's listening, if they want to become fact checkers, they can reach out to you and Jaskirat in particular. Also Sparsh, of course, on Twitter and Facebook, wherever, and ask you about how they can go on that, get on that path. Kamna, any last comments from you for the people who are listening?
As a mental health expert, as a therapist, I'm an ever optimist, and I always believe that we need to build our resilience as communities to keep on tackling these problems. And like Jaskirat said, that it's not all doom and gloom. There is a lot which is happening on the ground, but I also believe very strongly that we all as individuals need to come together, resonating with the sentiment that Surbi just said, that it's in our collective efforts that we can change the landscape of whatever is happening around us in our society. So we all need to kind of work towards it and keep on moving along that path. I think that's very, very essential.
Superb. Thank you, Sparsh. I know you're raring to go. I would love to hear from you as well. What you think is it that people can do to just get started on this, on countering misinformation?
I'm going to talk about just specifically related to the pandemic because I think everyone else has done like given us a lot of information that even I have to digest now. But for Corona and for COVID right now, I think just please listen to your doctors. Listen to your doctors, and if you want to learn about how you can be safe, there's just hand hygiene and sanitization and social distancing. Nothing else. Please, all the other things that they've told you that the best one was yesterday I read snorting cocaine can clear COVID. So I mean, that was it for me. That was the time when I was like, okay, we have to do something else about this. So yes, so there's a lot of things. Just listen to the guys who are expert in the field that you are confused about, and I think that should be it.
Superb. Thank you, Sparsh. Zafrin, any last comments and tips from your side? This is what you've seen.
Yeah, just some brief thoughts. We have been, working on the critical appraisal skills for media from as early as 2015, 2016. And at the time of COVID, this is really coming, handy to work with the media. The media literacy that other speakers have talked about, that's also important. Overall, increasing media literacy. And I think the solidarity and the social harmony messages are absolutely critical at this time. And the kindness messages, that we need each other at this time of crisis. We need to be kind to each other, and really framing them in a very creative and inspiring way, because we have to rise above the crowd of the misinformation and the infodemic. So that is how we need to work together. And we are ending in a lot of optimistic notes. So I think that is our way forward, to work together to inspire people to make the right choices in terms of information.
Absolutely. Jaskirat, any last tips from your side as well?
Well, it would be a bit of a repetition of what I already said. Like I said, it is not all gloom and doom, and it is also encouraging to see the number of people who already step forward to try and participate, regular readers, regular viewers, just citizens. And I would have to say, just wanted to add a caveat before I sign off, that while the tech platforms have done a lot, considering the resources that are at their disposal and the fact that their medium is used for 95% of the misinformation that's doing the round, I would say with confidence, having worked with these tech platforms, that they're probably doing close to only 10 to 20% of what they're capable of doing, given their resources that are available to them. So this would be, my sign off would be an appeal to these platforms and the people who have those resources to please put in those resources to address this, because we are seeing the players who are involved in organized and unorganized spreading of fake news growing at a faster pace than the fact checkers are at this stage right now. The motivations that these people who are spreading fake news could be many. It could be monetary, it could be ideological, it could be just time pass, or just watching the world burn, because some people like to watch the world burn. But we need to put in those resources, behind the people who are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jaskirat. In fact, I think one of the things that I would like to encourage everybody is that there's just so much information in this live. It's going to be on our pages. See it again. I think everybody has shared just so much about how you can start doing fact checking. And I think that's the most important thing when citizens decide that, okay, ab bahut ho gaya, main bhi fact checker. I think that should be the hashtag, main bhi fact checker. And people should start becoming and owning the fact that they can also be a fact checker, and they can also start verifying news and information that they're getting. So I think lots of onus on citizens, lots of onus on journalists, lots of onus on tech companies, and I think we all must come together. I thank the panel for joining me today, and particularly Manisha and Preeti for all the hard work that they've done throughout this discussion in helping folks who are disabled to understand what we're discussing today. I just want to mention a couple of final things and a few last important information that you can all use. Youth Ki Awaaz has been working with UNICEF India and YUVA for a while now, pretty much since the beginning of the lockdown. We've been running a campaign called Reimagine Together. We've been trying to have conversations around what is it that we want to reimagine the world to be as, post this pandemic. Misinformation is, of course, something I'm very sure that we don't want as a part of this world. So do write about it on Youth Ki Awaaz. Do write about on how you think fake news and misinformation can be combated. And feel free to reach out to these amazing speakers who joined us today on Twitter, on Facebook, and other platforms that they're on. And I hope you join again for the other lives that we do in the future. Have a great evening. Good night, everyone. Okay, the live has ended. Thank you so much, everyone. It was wonderful. I personally enjoyed. I'm slightly anxious about what's going to happen and how we're going to counter this, but I love the discussion that we had. So thank you so much, everyone, for